bullshit.
The No BS Marketing Show is brought to you by Laramore's men's and women's designer clothing. Free shipping, free returns. Shop men's and women's designer clothing, shoes, accessories, jewelry, and more online at laramores.com or in-store downtown Pittsburgh. It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is Rahmi Mowjood of Cucamonga Valley Medical Group. But first, let's cut the BS. What culture do you think your company has? Production? Sales? Marketing? Throughout the 20th century, most companies strive to gain economies of scale, scaling your business through more efficient operations, better production, process improvement. This led many companies to subconsciously create a production or operations culture. Not all companies did that, though. Some achieved economies of scale and realized that they were producing a lot of stuff. They had inventory, so they needed to move units. What'd they do? Hired a salesperson, then another one, then a sales manager, and now they had a sales team. If the sales team did well, they gained informal power or formal power or both. Either way, a sales culture was subconsciously created. Sales drove the organization either formally or informally. In both instances, companies can do well for a while, especially when we lived in an industrial economy through the mid to late 1980s. But then we moved into a service economy through the turn of the century. But now we're in an experience economy. And that means that the peak performers, the top tier companies, have a marketing culture built around the customer, listening to the customer, understanding the customer, doing a real drill down so they segment those customers into distinct markets with distinct characteristics and then give them a distinct marketing mix and position by market segment. Real marketing with a marketing roadmap, marketing processes, and marketing ROI, return on investment metrics that begin with the end in mind. Which culture do you have? If you think it might be a sales culture or an operations culture, it probably is. And you know what you have to do then, right? Cut the BS. Our guest today is Rahmi Mowjood, a physician leader and shareholder of Cucamonga Valley Medical Group in California. Dr. Mowjood leads a team of providers and staff while also seeing patients of all ages. But much of his time is spent educating older patients on long-term care and other issues affecting their health. He brings a passionate approach to leadership and motivating employees and shareholders and referral sources, stakeholders, everybody to his leadership. And he's also a compassionate healthcare provider. That makes him unique, and we want to hear from him today all about his leadership style, how he communicates, how he motivates. Dr. Mowjood, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. After that introduction, I don't think there's much more I need to say, but thanks anyways.
Well,
I appreciate that.
I'm ready to hear you because we've had the chance to talk a few times, and it's inspirational. I've observed you with patients. I've observed you with other providers and employees, and I know your approach and your philosophy, and that's why I wanted to have you on the show.
Thank you.
What we start with on the show is we always give that great open-ended question to go back as far as you'd like, but tell us about your career path, your journey, your education, how you got to where you are today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and go Steelers, right?
Yeah.
I think that, to go a deep dive, I think a lot of it comes from thinking about where my roots come from. My family is originally from Sri Lanka, and I came to this country when I was 1. So my father and mother and myself traversed across the country as my dad repeated his medical training. He was a physician in Sri Lanka, but in the early 70s, there was such a shortage of physicians here that it was very easy for foreign doctors to get spots here. And he was able to do that. And interestingly enough, I always think he had a choice. He had friends in England and he had friends in America. He could have gone either place, and he ended up here. By a choice in his mind, I would have possibly been, a British citizen. So I always find that interesting. I think that, being a physician is one of the things that I grew up with as a sign of success. Now, growing up in this country, I see that that's not the only way to be successful. But when you come from a small country where the opportunities are very limited, you know, I think when parents have children, they want the best for them. And in a limited society where the opportunities kind of are very finite, being a physician is one of the things. So my father was a physician, my grandfather was a physician, and we came from a long line of healthcare related individuals. So, when I got into college, that was something that was really sort of impressed upon me, but I rebelled a little bit. I didn't want people telling me, hey, this is what you're expected to do. And when I said I wasn't interested in that, I didn't like looking at crestfallen faces. But, I pursued other interests. I was an actor for a while. I majored in theater. And eventually I found my way back. But there were a couple of things that have resonated with me. My father was an infectious disease physician, and he would come home and tell us, very interesting stories about his patients, not so much about their illnesses, but about who they were and the struggles they were going through. And I have a very distinct memory of us spending Thanksgiving with one of his patients who was by herself, lived in Pomona. And I remember going and giving her food one Thanksgiving, and another Thanksgiving actually having Thanksgiving with her in her home, an African-American older lady. And that impressed upon me a lot about what my dad did. And it wasn't just writing prescriptions. It wasn't just kind of going through the motions. He had connected to many of his patients, and she wasn't the only one. He had connected to her on a level beyond her disease. And that always resonated with me long into my career as trying to be an actor and then getting into medical school. And now that as I have this practice that I'm blessed to have, I trace my roots back to that more than anything else. I use that experience to talk about that service, that servant mentality. I use that experience when I applied to residency, and the residency director, when he interviewed me, that was the first thing he said. Man, I really was taken by your story about what your family did for this patient. And I think when I think about what we're trying to do now in our second generation of being physicians and in me running this office, my dad worked for a big medical group called Kaiser. We have our own private group, but I think our efforts to try to do a servant leadership type of an experience is one and the same. So that to me is kind of the deep dive that might help explain where I'm at right now.
I love it. And that's, like I was saying on the intro, why I wanted to hear about your leadership style and your communication style. The servant leadership is clear when someone meets you and when they observe you. So talk about Cucamonga Valley Medical Group and how that practice has been built and how you've moved into the role in a leadership position there.
Sure. So Cucamonga Valley Medical Group is a family practice group. We started in about 2006. And to be quite honest, there was myself and Dr. Kyle Smart and two other providers. And at that point, we were just looking to find work and pay off our student loans, right? You talk about market segmentation and looking at how each person is a little bit different. When you're a young physician just out of residency, all you want to do is find a job to help pay down your six-figure debt. So, that was a great opportunity. They invited me. The three of them actually asked me to join. The four of us started ambitiously with one clinic. We expanded to two clinics. And then as things oftentimes happen, partnership gets a little muddied. The problems arise, and we ended up having a divorce with the two partners who were married. So Kyle and I ended up taking control. We brought on Dr. Dominguez, who is now a shareholder as well, and tried to just keep things afloat, to be quite honest. The recession hit us hard out here. We were ensconced in a very suburban community where a lot of people lost their homes. And so we had a lot of people that had insurance that no longer did. But we were able to weather that storm. We have grown now from that point into 5 locations, and we're hoping to grow into 2 more locations next year. Dr. Smart was the CEO for a while, and a couple of years ago, he and I made an intentional choice And I was the one that spearheaded this when I said, look, I think we need to switch. I think that you've been holding the reins and really keeping us going. I think it's time that I took over to help give you a break and let me now assume a lot of the responsibility. Both of us were always present throughout, but I think everyone looked to him as the CEO and looked to me as the chief medical officer. So last year, 2016, we spent the entire year prepping and training and getting sort of our alignment together so that when the roles switched, which was the beginning of this year, and I became the CEO, it would be a smooth transition. We've got a great management team, we've got great administrators, and more than anything else, we've got a fantastic leadership coach, Lisa Rios, who we met about 5 years ago when we needed some guidance. And she's introduced us to a lot of great management protocols and styles. We never had budgets. Now we do. We never had strategic planning meetings. Now we do. We never had an org chart. Now we do. And it's evolved to a very high level. And so a lot of my leadership style has been prompted by that influence, has been prompted by, my upbringing in high school and through my family and my faith. But a lot of it is just seeing, and learning on the job and doing and kind of instinctually going back to that servant leadership. And servant leadership, something that I discovered recently as a phrase. Like I never knew that there was a phrase for that. And I recently discovered the servant leadership book that was written some years ago. And I'm slowly pulling my way through the book and responding very strongly because a lot of it is what we have done through Cucamonga Valley Medical Group instinctually. And the biggest turning point for us was when we established our core culture about 5 years ago. And that core culture really spoke to how we wanted to live our lives, not just as professionals in our office, but how we wanted to live our lives outside of our office. It's one and the same. And that has really been at the core of what I feel like has made us successful as how we define it.
Talk about that core culture a little bit.
Yeah, so, it was meant to be a meeting when Lisa Rios got myself, Dr. Smart, and Dr. Dominguez together, and she had recognized once we kind of got through some of the peripheral issues when we retained her for a leadership coach, she said, you guys really need a core culture to get sort of established and lay the foundation for what you want to do. No problem, Lisa, let's go ahead and do that. And what I thought was going to be a 1 to 2 hour meeting ended up being a 6-hour meeting as we really dialed deep into what mattered to us, three of us. And we came up with the core culture that we felt reflected strongly our own personal views, our faith-based views, and how we want people to be treated, whether they're patients of ours or not. So our core culture at the center is life, love, and compassion. And we want to have a philosophy of excellence in everything that we do. And our priorities are growth, customer service, trust, and collaboration. So that forms the central sort of core of our culture. And we have it framed in all the rooms, in all of our offices. It's something that we really work hard to have our staff live. And we want to show them that this core culture is not something that's just here in the office. So we do a lot of community service outside of the office. And we invite our staff to be a part of that. We invite our staff to express their feelings. Many of them get attached to patients. If they want to send patients flowers, if they want to do something nice for a patient, we encourage that. And we say that this is all part of the core culture. If you have a staff member that's struggling, we want to step in and help them. And so we are hoping that it rubs off on ourselves as well as everybody else even when you're not in the office. You end up doing good things, you end up being good servants, and by doing that, your leadership style comes out when you least expect it. And that has been really the focal point for us as we've grown.
Check out this quote from Esquire magazine. One of the country's leading specialty stores for selection and service. Don't leave Pittsburgh without your little black bag filled with beautiful fashions from the city's premier family-owned clothier for men and women. Experience the highest quality designer and private label collections, impeccable customer service, and custom tailoring that have been Laramore's hallmark for more than 75 years. Now that's an endorsement. Shop online at laramores.com or in-store downtown Pittsburgh. Talk about the philosophy of excellence that you mentioned in that, because you have a broad range of people working from a compensation standpoint. So you have physicians, you have physician extenders, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants, and then you have some nursing staff and so forth, all the way down to an entry level person. How do you promote that philosophy of excellence in positions where historically across the country there's a higher turnover than, say, at the provider stand level?
Sure. That's a great question because you are right. There is a lot of turnover. We're not. We have to deal with that as well. But one of the things we realize is that it's very easy, to get swept into the mentality that, well, I'm the physician and this is my office, and so everything runs through me. When in truth, a patient, if you look at a patient's experience from beginning to end with a visit, maybe 20% of that entire 100% visit is spent with the physician. The remaining 80% is spent interacting with your front office staff, then interacting with your back office staff as your medical assistant or your nurse will room that patient, then interacting maybe with your billing staff, then maybe interacting with your refill coordinator or the person that verifies your insurance. They spend more time talking to them than potentially they would spending with the physician. So how can it be that everything stops and ends with me? Everything has to stop and end with all of us. So the philosophy of excellence is derived from the fact that everyone in my office, from the scanner to the physician and everyone in between, has a direct impact on the patient experience. And if they don't feel compelled to be excellent, then that's going to reflect poorly on one percentage of or portion, segment, pie chart, whichever analogy you want to use, of that entire patient experience. And one of the things we did was we believe and we tell all of our staff that you have a direct impact on our patient's care. Okay, you may not be a physician, but when the patient comes in and you greet them with a smile, that's a direct impact. When the patient comes in and calls and you're very cordial and you're very patient with them as they're stressed on the phone, that's a direct impact. That's how you can be excellent in everything you do. And you don't necessarily have to be the one writing the prescription or diagnosing, the medical problem. And in that way, all of our staff are empowered because they all touch our patients. They just don't touch them like a physician necessarily would. But their influence on the patient is extremely, extremely important when you look at it from the patient's perspective. And that's where that excellence has to come through. And we work very hard to try to maintain and empower our staff to, be excellent in all that they do when they have an opportunity to interact with their patient.
I think it's really important, especially when I was talking earlier about an experience economy. That experience that we have in healthcare does touch all of those levels. And when I was with the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, I used to get frustrated because I would try to show our physicians and our higher end providers that you can do all this great stuff. And our surveys are talking about people weren't able to find their way from the parking garage to visit their loved one. People didn't like the food or the bedside manner of the nurse. And we're saying we're all bragging about this great technology we've invested in and these high end physicians that have notoriety, and we put their faces on billboards and in videos. And you're getting evaluated on some of these other things because they're part of the experience. So I like the fact that you are recognizing that and pushing that the whole way through the organization, and you empower people to make their own decisions. And I like your idea of saying if someone feels so close and they want to send a card or they want to send flowers, they want to do something unique, they can make that decision just like at Ritz-Carlton, someone can make a decision.
Correct. And a lot of what we did came from that type of customer service, and, we have modified it. We're not in the hotel and leisure industry, but a lot of the effort and the experience that we're trying to create can be duplicated. And so being able to use that same foundation and modify it in a healthcare perspective, I think is very innovative. I don't know if anyone else is doing it. I'm sure people come to this realization. The question is whether or not they're able to actually make that transformation. And by no means is it an easy transformation to make, nor is it something that you make and then you just leave it alone. We're constantly working on it. We're constantly fine-tuning it, constantly addressing issues. But the difference is now we've got more people that are buying in and playing the game with us and participating. And that makes it easier. Rather than myself and Dr. Smart and a couple of other people, the way it was about 6, 7 years ago, now we've got a team of 60, 70 people that are all buying into it. And that's a huge, huge impact.
Life, love, and compassion, philosophy of excellence, and those core pillars you mentioned, growth, customer service, trust, and collaboration. That's some serious leadership and communication to be able to build that as a leadership team and then communicate it on down. What are some of the ways that you've done the communication to get everyone to understand the whole thing? I know you mentioned that it's in every patient room, so I think they see it every day when they walk down the hall and in the patient rooms. What are some other things you've done to communicate it?
So we, from an internal perspective, we had a leadership team that involved all of our upper level administration and managers and all of our providers. And that was a leadership team that met monthly. One of the things we realized was, we had a manager meeting, then we had a provider meeting, then we had a shareholder meeting, and there was no communication. What was discussed here was influencing the providers, but the providers weren't there. And what was discussed at the provider meeting was affecting the managers and their staff, but they weren't there. So we said, you know what, we need to have one meeting. Everyone needs to be there. Everyone needs to develop higher levels of trust. We need to foster healthy disagreement. We need to foster healthy discussion. We need to put our egos at the door, and we need to be able to talk for the betterment of the company. So for a couple of years, every month, all of us got together. We went through a lot of different training through Lisa Rios and her company, Leadership Dimensions. The group went through the five dysfunctions of a team by Lencioni, and we went through that entire training course to help improve our accountability and our trust with each other. And our communication improved. But as we've grown, that group became challenging to maintain because the growth, there were so many people. So now what we've done is we have a corporate leadership team that is composed of people from all different parts of the company. We have providers, shareholders, managers. We all discuss. We all deal with corporate issues. We all talk about issues with core culture. And then each office is considered a home base. And each home base will be developing their own leadership team. And that leadership team then will be discussing the issues that affect that office and will communicate with the corporate leadership team so that we can continue to maintain consistency in the core culture. We've also created a position where we have someone that's dealing with development, orientation, training, and core culture management. And this individual's responsibility is to make sure that everything across the company, through every office, through every new office, through every new hire, through every new provider, everyone has the same level of training, the same understanding of the core culture, the same maintenance of how the core culture is enacted as they hit the ground running. It's a position that we felt was extremely important because of our growth and our potential growth in 2018. We needed someone to make sure that all of the training and the recruitment was all across the board the same so that we didn't have any differences in how the core culture was being manifested from one office to another office. And then, when from the patient perspective, we want them to tell us when we aren't holding up to that core culture. We know that when the core culture is in a patient room and they're looking at it, they may say, well, you know what? I was not treated very well on the phone. I want to know about that. I want you to tell me, and I want us to be able to fix that so that you no longer are afraid that that experience might be duplicated, right? So we know that by putting that up there, it might leave us open to criticism. But if you don't accept and respond to that criticism, then you're not going to grow. And you're not going to be able to find out, okay, what more can I do? How is my core culture not showing up in certain areas so I can fix it? And so we communicate with our patients. We want their feedback. We want them to tell us what's going on. And even patients that get upset and irate, we really want to sort of de-escalate it and kind of get to the core reason as to why they're upset so that we can address it. And more often than not, we're able to salvage a good relationship with patients and we're able to continue to maintain a good healthcare standard for them.
We're with Dr. Rahmi Mowjood of Cucamonga Valley Medical Group. He's talked about their core philosophy, their mission, their vision and values, and how they've communicated that and how the leadership team has grown and over the years working with their leadership consultant and just all kinds of cool stuff from a leadership and communication standpoint. Want to go back a little bit to you specifically with just to talk a little bit about mentors. Is there anyone other than family, any one or two or three people other than family that over the course of your lifetime you've seen, well, in my 20s, I had this person that guided me this direction. Then when I first started practicing medicine, I had this person. Is there anything like that? Because we found that our listeners really like to hear how throughout your life you can have various mentors and even mentor other people yourself.
Sure. It's interesting when you ask that question, you start thinking. And sometimes you think of one thing and then you end up spending time in that part of your mind and you end up evolving into something else. For me, my faith, being a Muslim, my faith has really been a strong guiding force for me in the challenges I've had in my life. My father passed away when I was 18. I had two younger brothers, aged 10 and 8 at that time. So it really created a strong need for me to change my life direction a little bit to be able to help take care of my family, and my faith and the lessons that I've learned there and that I continue to learn as I have my own family now has been very, very influential. I will say that I had a really great mentor in high school, a teacher, Mr. Larry McMillan, who is no longer with us, but he was really influential to me in that he taught a class in high school called Individual Humanities, and it was a class that he created because he studied how individuals throughout history have been able to affect profound change. And what is it about each of these individuals that was similar? So he, a lot of his creation was created by the influence of like Albert Einstein and Mahatma Gandhi and Jesus Christ and Prophet Muhammad. And he looked at all these individuals that had such strong influences in history and came up with a class that sort of said, hey, these are the traits that these individuals had. These are the traits that we can see in strong leaders. And that was very, very powerful to me. And he was someone that I stayed in touch with even after high school and into college. Someone that I really valued his influence in my life, not only just as a mentor, but as someone that helped me become a better writer, someone that helped me become a better person to express through the English language, things of that nature. So that he's been very influential. I think as I've gone through medical school and residency, there have been a lot of doctors that I've interacted with, a lot of colleagues that I've interacted with. But I'll be honest, I think the people that influence me the most are my patients. I see patients get through some of the most harrowing experiences that life can throw at them. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they fail, but the success or failure is not what makes them influential. It's how they deal with it. It's how they go through it. And that is very inspiring and influential to me. Even I lived in London for a year, pursuing a post-baccalaureate degree in drama and acting. And I saw people there that have gone through challenges based off of living in the United Kingdom during times of strife, during IRA issues, people that I met, and just the influence that they had on me is how they got through it. Some of them got through it very well, and some of them still struggle with it, but their journey is what really influenced me. And I think more than anything else, when I see a patient that is doing well on their journey, despite knowing what the outcome, I find that very inspiring. And I find that very soulful as far as nourishment for me, keeps me going, makes me feel like, I'm in the right place. I'm in doing the right thing, because we always have doubts. Maybe I should have done something else, or maybe I should be doing something else. And those types of interactions really help keep me grounded.
Hear more of my interview with Rahmi Mowjood on part 2 of the No BS Marketing Show. Thanks for joining us for the No BS Marketing Show, brought to you by Laramore's Men's and Women's Designer Clothing. Free shipping, free returns. Shop men's and women's designer clothing, shoes, accessories, jewelry, and more online at laramores.com or in-store downtown Pittsburgh. Whether you're a loyal no BSer or a first-time listener, your feedback matters. Post your reviews online at iTunes or wherever you consume your podcast content. Let us know what you think. Those reviews are the lifeblood of the No BS Marketing Show. Feel free to email me directly with your ideas for guests or show topics. Dave@masssolutions.biz. Visit masssolutions.biz for show notes, plus additional marketing and messaging resources like our No BS Marketing Weekly Update. Sign up and receive timely, valuable ideas to improve your marketing and transform your message. Again, visit masssolutions.biz. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.